One evening, while sitting alone watching random videos, a semi-retired man came across a video about the intelligence of crows. After watching the entire video, the one video turned into two, and two turned into the entire night, learning everything he could about the bird. Video after video he watched and became more and more fascinated. By the time he got ready for bed, he had made the decision. I'm going to make friends with a crow. This should be easy, he thought to himself. He lives in a rural area, sees them all the time. How hard could it be? So he began carrying food in his car because he seen them near roadkill, and he kept some by the back door of his house, figuring he'd keep an eye out now. And, well, he saw nothing. Hell, he only had pretty much one parameter. He just had to find one that was close enough to his home that if he did find one along the side of the road, it would actually see where he came from. This went on so long, in fact, that eventually he forgot to look. I mean, he'd come home, and when he got home, he'd just remember, wow, I didn't even look to see if I saw a crow. A couple of months had passed, and he'd pretty much given up on the whole silly idea, thinking it was kind of stupid anyway. And as he was sitting, putting some dishes away, he had the windows open. It was a beautiful day, and the light breeze coming through the house. He was mentally planning the errands he was going to run in the morning, and then he heard it, the unmistakable caw of a crow. It sounded close. With a little bit of excitement, he grabbed some food and headed toward the window. There it sat, on top of the burn pile, making noise and looking around. So, slowly, he opened the back door, keeping an eye on the crow, and started to carefully walk outside. Immediately, the crow looked directly at him and bounced to the far side of the pile. The man stopped, didn't move at all, hoping that the crow would almost get comfortable with his presence. After a few seconds, he began talking softly to the bird. He didn't know why, other than he felt pretty stupid just standing there. Although standing there talking to a bird probably didn't look much better. A few more seconds passed, and he decided to toss some of the food near the crow, making sure the crow saw him do it. At once, he threw the food. The crow flew up to an overhanging electrical wire, not flying away, but being cautious. The man waited a few seconds after throwing the food, then slowly backed up to the porch and sat on the step. The crow made a couple more caws, keeping an eye on the man. Then curiosity got the better of her, and she flew down to investigate. Keeping an eye on the man, she inspected the food thoroughly, then grabbed it and flew back to the safety of her perch. After eating the food, the crow seemed to study the man for a moment, then flew away. As the crow flew away, the man thought to himself, well, that was pretty underwhelming, and went back inside to go about the rest of his day. A couple days passed by, and on another beautiful evening, the man was sitting outside under the shade of a big oak reading a book, when the caw of a crow grabs his attention. Sitting on the wire above him, a crow seemed to be watching him intently. I wonder if this is the same bird, he thought to himself as he put down the book to study the crow. The crow watches the man carefully and intently as he moves inside the house. He reappears a few seconds later, and he tosses something on the ground near where he had done it before. Then he goes and sits back down and picks up his book. Keeping a careful eye on the man, she glides down to the spot, grabs the food, and flies back to her wire. This time, the bird doesn't eat and just fly away. This time, it stays, and it watches. So he starts to read his book, and after the first paragraph, he says, "What the hell?" and he starts to read it out loud. The crow's head begins to tilt back and forth, turning it occasionally, as if it's almost trying to understand what it's saying. After 10 or so pages, the bird gives a caw and flies off. Eventually, this interaction became more and more frequent. In fact, after a time, the Crow became so trusting that sometimes it actually perched on the arm of the chair while he read the book. After all the research he had done, he'd pretty sure that it was a girl crow, so he started calling her April after the month that they had first met. Sometimes she would sit on the telephone pole, watching him as he got home from work. When he got out of the car, she would give a caw, let him know she was there. He would go in the house for a little bit of time, but eventually come out with a treat and a book. Sometimes when it was cooler out, he would wear this blue sweatshirt with a hoodie and a drawstring. This seemed to be her favorite, because she would listen to his voice and play with the drawstring. It seemed as though April liked the sound of his voice. It was deep, calm, and somewhat rhythmic. As the month went by, the two became closer. Well, as close as a man and a bird could be, anyway. Whenever he would be outside, she would sooner or later show up. And if she was hanging around, he would find a reason to go outside. But their favorite time together was when they could sit underneath that old tree and read a book. At one point, he took a selfie of them, two of them together, and had it framed and hung it on the wall next to the back door. Their friendship went on as summer began to change to fall. And then, out of nowhere, April just stopped showing up. It wasn't uncommon to go a few days without seeing her, but it was now going on 2 weeks, and he started to get worried. He missed her company, but most of all, he didn't want anything to happen to her. The weeks turned into months, and sitting on the steps on the last day of October, watching the full moon start to rise, he had to resign himself to the fact that she was gone for good. Later that night, as he was getting ready for bed, he heard a thump at the back door. Probably kids playing a prank, he thought to himself as he went to the door. It is Halloween after all. Turning on the outside light, he looks out the window and he sees absolutely nothing. He steps outside to get a little bit better look, looks against the house, and with a start, "Whoa!" he says out loud. "Where'd you come from?" Curled up against the side of his house is a nude woman, long dark hair, dark eyes, and shivering from the cold. Stammering for words for a second, the man reaches in the door and grabs the blue hoodie that's always there and slowly moves toward the woman. "Okay," he says softly, "I'm not going to hurt you. Let's get you covered up some and try and get you some help." As he wraps the hoodie around her, she gently pushes part of the hoodie against her face, takes a very deep breath, and closes her eye. "Okay, darling, you stay there," the man says. "I'm going to get you some help. It looks like you're in some trouble." As he starts to move away, the woman reaches for his hand and grabs it and holds on tight, shaking her head no, looking at him with pleading eyes. "Whoa, wait a minute," he says to her. "You don't, you're trying to tell me you don't want me to call anyone for you? You don't want any help?" Again, the woman shakes her head no, silently begging him not to make a call. "Well, okay, I guess," he says hesitantly. "You're going to freeze out here tonight like that, so why don't you sit right here on this step and let me get you a blanket." The man walks her to the step and has her sit in clear view of the back door. He then walks into the house, keep an eye on the girl, and grabs a blanket and his phone. The man only has his back turned for a second when he hears a tapping sound behind him. "Shit," he thinks to himself. It was a trap. Slowly he turns around, cell phone in one hand and blanket in the other. "I thought I asked you to wait on the stair," the man says, guardedly, as a woman just stands inside the doorway with a hoodie wrapped around her, holding the picture of he and April that had been hanging on the wall. His voice now firm, seeing her hold the photo. "Be careful with that. It means a lot to me." The woman, now sensing and understanding his attitude shift, holds the picture facing toward the man with one hand, and with the other hand taps on the picture twice, then points to herself. Yes, the man says. That's me and my friend April. I haven't seen her in some time, and that makes that picture mean even more to me. So please, be careful with that picture. In fact, I'd appreciate it if you just put it down. The woman slowly taps on the picture again, making sure this time it's on the image of the man, and then points at the man. Yeah, that's me. It's only a few months old, he says, sounding now like he's starting to lose patience with this whole situation. Oh, shit. Now realizing this might be a question. Yeah, my name is Brandon. The young woman smiles now for the first time, and then taps on the image of April, and then herself, and then looks at Brandon hopefully. Yes, that's my friend April, he says again. The woman then smiles again, nodding and patting herself on the chest as he says the name April. Wait a minute. So you're saying your name was April too? He asks, somewhat confused. The young woman's entire face lights up, and she begins to take an excited step forward. Okay, April. Why don't you cover up with this? Brennan says as he gently tosses the blanket at her feet. And I'll get us some help. April's smile fades, and her posture looks defeated as Brandon begins to unlock his phone to make a call, only stopping because of April tapping more forcefully on the picture. Hey, you need to put that down now, he says more forcefully, while taking a step closer to April, now holding her hand out straight, silently pleading for Brandon to wait while looking side to side. Seeing a book on a shelf by the door, she quickly grabs the book and kneels down on the floor, sitting back on her heels. She once again taps on the image of Brandon, then taps on the book, and then taps on the image of April, then herself. Then, almost as an afterthought, she flips the drawstring of the hoodie over and over again in her fingers, and then begins to slowly and gently tap it against the image of April in the photo. Yes, he says, now frustrated that he even decided to help. I used to read April books, and she loved playing with my. Holy fuck, how would you know that? Standing silently with his eyes and mouth wide open, Brandon looks back and forth from the April photo to the April person, the April photo, and the April person, multiple times, April smiling, hopefully, as he does so. That's, that's, that's just not possible, he struggles to get out. April slowly nods her head yes, as Brandon's brain tries to process this new revelation. Can this, can, can this be true? He says, sounding half hopeful and still very much confused. Brandon begins to look deeply into her eyes as if trying to see into her soul while searching for some sort of truth. April moves one step closer, slowly reaching out her slightly trembling hand to gently touch Brandon's cheek. Tears begin to fall as she slowly and gently begins to trace the lines of his face with her finger. April, he says almost as a whisper, to not destroy the moment if it is a dream. It's you. They both surge into each other's arms, like two lovers long been separated by war. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the world, not the universe, nothing. The two of them, now lying on the couch together with nothing covering them but the blue hoodie, both silently listening to the sounds from the outside coming from the still open door. I have a lot of questions, Brandon says while lightly rubbing Abel's back. And we should probably shut that door and grab that blanket off the floor. I'm starting to freeze my ass off. April smiles broadly and kisses Brandon on the cheek. She rolls off of him and goes to close the door, wraps herself up in the blanket and picking up the book on the way. When she gets back to Brandon, she lays back on top of him off to one side, covering them both with the blanket. While doing so, she hands the book to Brandon and lays her head on his chest, drawing imaginary lines on his arm with the hoodie's drawstring. Brandon asks, "You want me to read this to you?" And without hesitation, April nods yes and snuggles in even closer. Brandon opens the book and begins to read. April lays there for a while, listening to Brandon's heartbeat, feeling his chest rise and fall with the deep breaths of his slumber. She slowly and carefully gets up, covering him with the blanket and slipping on the hoodie, smiling as she does at how big it is on her. She quietly moves from room to room, curiously investigating, opening drawers and cabinets, looking in closets, smelling the soap that he uses, and finding the cologne that he sometimes wears. When she gets to the bedroom, she sees the bed he sleeps in. It's a large bed, but it looks like only one side is ever used. She lies down on the unused side, facing his side of the bed, placing her hand on his pillow. Her eyes begin to well up as she allows herself to imagine what it would be like to wake up next to him and to hear him say her name each morning. After lying there for a while, she gets up and she moves back to where Brandon is sleeping. She kneels down next to him, lightly kisses his cheek, and heads toward the back door. When she gets to the back door, she looks down at the drawstring and with a firm tug pulls it completely out of the hoodie. Tears now streaming down her face as she opens the door and steps outside. Damn, it's cold in here. Did you close that door all the way? Brandon asks sleepily as he reaches to find where April is. Not finding her, he stirs, moving, looking around the now dimly sunlit room. April, where'd you go? He calls out, now sitting up and trying to get his bearings, stretching a bit from sleeping on the couch. Damn it, the door is open. Pulling his pants on and keeping the blanket wrapped around him, he gets up and closes the door. April, where are you? His voice sounding more concerned as he begins looking through the house. Brandon checks the entire house, calling her name as he does. No answer, no sign. Then he remembers. The door. He rushes to the door and flings it open. April! He calls out, loudly as he steps outside and then suddenly freezing in his tracks. The blue hoodie is lying in a pile, not 10 feet from the door. No! He yells as he sprints to the spot, scooping up the sweatshirt and looking up into the tree, the wire, the power pole, and the sky, searching for her, calling for her. This can't be. Not like this. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. He yells into the air, but only the old oak and the wind are listening. Brandon stands outside for some time, scanning the skies and listening, then moves to the chair under the tree to continue the vigil. As he sits there, he notices the drawstring, her favorite, was missing, and stuck inside the sweatshirt a long black feather, longer than what he would have guessed. Hours passed, and still no April. Eventually, reluctantly, he goes inside. He spent the day not straying far from the door or the window, and as night began to fall, he decided to leave the back door unlocked, the light on, and the hoodie draped over the chair. That night, he slept again on the couch. One night turned into two, two turned into a week, and weeks turned into months. Hope began to vanish, and as time went by, he began to doubt that it all ever happened. Maybe it all had just been a great and terrible dream, but almost as soon as he's ready to dismiss it all as just imagination, he walks past the picture, the book and the feather, and the old hoodie hanging underneath them, and he begins to remember how lonely, empty, and sad he feels. And no dream can do that. No matter how many years pass, he still misses her. It was real. Margaret pulls into the driveway of the old farmhouse. She felt sorry for the older man. He didn't really have anyone in his life, and time and the disease had wrecked his body. She'd been doing this for a long time, and she was pretty sure that it wouldn't be much longer for him. Good morning, Mr. Swanson, Margaret says as she opens the door. Good morning, Margaret, Brandon replies. Please call me Brandon, he says, while eating some toast and drinking coffee. Brandon, now well in his 70s, is mostly bound to a wheelchair, the stairs outside being replaced by a ramp. How are you feeling today? Margaret asks as she busies herself doing her chores. Feeling pretty good, Brandon answers. It's going to be a nice afternoon out there today, he hints, looking toward the door. Margaret looks at Brandon sternly. Only for a little bit, but when it warms up more, then back inside. It's supposed to freeze tonight, and you can't afford a cold. Hell, that's about all I can afford nowadays, Brandon chuckles. Margaret, now smiling at Brandon, says, Give me an hour or so to get a couple things done. Then I'll get you outside for a bit. Deal? She asks. Deal, he answers. The sun feels warm and the air smells clean as Margaret locks the chair in place. There you go. I'll be back to get you in just a little bit, she says, as Brandon closes his eyes and breathes in as deeply as his old lungs will allow. With the fresh air and the warmth of the sun, not long before he drifts off to sleep. Margaret gently wakes up Brandon. Mr. Swanson, she says softly, it's time to go inside. As she stoops down to unlock the chair wheel, she notices something on his lap. What's this? As she picks up a long, old, beat up shoelace looking string off of Brandon's lap. She starts to put it in her pocket when Brandon sees it. Where'd you get that? He demands with enough force it makes her jump a bit. I'm sorry, Mr. Swanson, she says apologetically. It was just sitting here on your lap. Brandon snatches the string out of Margaret's hand and begins to examine it, then immediately starts to scan the skies, the tree, the wire, the pole, and the sky again, looking and listening. Abruptly, without looking at Margaret, he says, I'm not going in. Margaret, stunned by his actions, takes a moment to gather herself and says, Mr. Swanson, I'm sorry, but I can't let you stay out here tonight. It's supposed to freeze. If I let you stay out here, I'll be fired, and I need this job. Without looking at her, still scanning and remembering April showed up at night, he says, Very well. Margaret wheels Brandon into the house, but remains concerned about him. As she finishes up and heads out the door, Brandon says, Margaret, I apologize for being rude outside. I hope you can forgive me. And please, call me Brandon. Margaret smiles and looks back. It's already forgotten, Brandon. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. Margaret still feels uneasy as she leaves the driveway and decides to check on him in the morning. He waits for her to head down the road, watching the dust from the gravel road until it disappears. Then he starts to get ready, turning the outside lights on, unlocking and cracking the door open, and setting the old worn out hoodie just outside the doorway. Brandon moves back to his hospital like bed, placed now about where the old couch used to be. Once getting there, he transfers over to the bed with some effort and positions himself upright to watch out the window, forgetting, however, in his rush and excitement, to lock the chair wheels. The cold wakes him up first. The wind blew the door open a bit more, and the furnace keeps kicking on but can't seem to keep up. Pulling a blanket on himself, he hears the sound he's been waiting for, the caw of a crow just outside the door. April, he thinks excitedly, begins to transfer himself to the chair. Then, all of a sudden, the chair moves away and sends Brandon face first to the floor. Brandon, not letting go of the chair, pulls it over on its side, and pain shoots through his back, shoulder, and hips. Ah! He yells as he hits the ground with a thud. The pain is severe and increases with any type of movement. All the while, he can hear a crow outside. Caw, caw, caw. Slowly, painfully, Brandon begins to drag himself to the door, foot by foot, excruciating foot, blood from his bleeding nose and mouth smearing a line underneath his body as he heads down the ramp. All the while, the crow, caw, 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 until he gets to the bottom of the ramp. He can go no further. His body is not only tired and diseased, but now also broken. He starts to shiver as the cold begins to take hold, and the crow sits on the old chair, now quietly watching. Margaret leaves her house early this morning to make an extra stop to check on Mr. Swanson. She hadn't felt right since she left yesterday evening and needed to check. She pulled into the driveway, parked her car, and headed around back. As she gets around the corner, she immediately sees the back door is wide open and moves toward the door while pulling out her phone, stopping dead in her tracks as she sees a small pool of blood and drag marks heading out of the house and down the ramp. Running back to her car, she dials 911 and locks herself in her car while waiting for the police. Two crows sit quietly on the pole, watching the search and the investigation. After some time, the crows fly off together and disappear off into the distance. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this story. We, as our channel at 3 Foot Good, never asked for anyone to give us likes and subscribes. However, since this is something brand new, if you like it and you want me to throw some more stuff like this on the channel in a different little spot, I'm going to need some likes to do that. And for those of you who stuck around for this long, here's an alternate ending. As she walked around the corner, she stopped dead in her tracks. Mr. Swanson lay at the bottom of the ramp in a small pool of blood. She rushes to him and checks for a non-existent pulse while dialing 911. A lone crow watched from the pole as this all transpires. Dreams can be a bitch. Thanks again for checking it out. We'll see y'all later.